Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of three amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. Obviously, you should be reading the Detroit Free Press and all of the great work that O2 is putting out. Actually had something new drop over on the Motor City Hoops Substack. My guy, Mickey Jacobs from the Order of the Blazing Horse, had a really cool article over there about a Pistons superfan, so go check that out. If you have not, I'll have more content coming as the offseason picks up and some NBA draft stuff that is Pistons related. We will eventually get into some Pistons second round targets, but we're like 7 days away. I think we're a week away from the withdrawal date. We might as well just wait, see who's staying in, who's out, and that'll give us a better idea of who may be there at pick 37. Before we get into today's episode, which is using the playoffs as a lens into the future for this Pistons team, we did have some awards come out on Tuesday, I believe it was. O2, Ron Holland misses out on second team all rookie. I believe he was third runner-up, I guess, is what we would call it there. That's correct?
Yeah, so he 17 votes, so he didn't make one of the two teams, but yeah, he was one of the players who were on the outside, and I think he was one of a couple who finished with 17 votes, so kind of brought up in the rear there.
Yeah, so, the voting kind of went the way I thought it was. I thought he would have a chance if voters really valued the fact that he played 81 of 82 games, whatever it was, 15 minutes a game, whatever it was, for a team that ended up in the playoffs, not even in the play-in. Listen, these awards, it's always the same idea of it really comes down to what voters value, and voters value different things, and that's okay. That's what makes sports great. That's what causes discussion and gives us podcast platforms, because we can give our perspectives and your perspectives out there may be different. I would have been cool to see him on there. The one thing I would encourage people, this is actually kind of fun to do, go look at the last 10, 15 years of all rookie teams, and you will find that they're not necessarily a great indictment of future success for some of these players. It is truly kind of fun to go and look at some of those teams and then see how the careers progress from some of those guys, Omari.
Yeah, I would say all rookie is, like, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but like trajectories just go off in wildly different directions after year one. So it is fun to kind of go back and look at some of the past teams and see, guys who started off really strong and fizzled out pretty quickly, guys who were not on the radar who ended up becoming the best players of that class. And yeah, like with Ron, it was interesting because he played 81 games, and I also think he was outside of the top 15 in minutes played, or he was in like that 15 through 20 range. So, I think from a visibility standpoint, there are probably some guys that were just in front of more eyes because they started more games, or whatever the case may be. But Ron obviously had a great rookie season. I think he as a number 5 pick to play as many games as he did and carve out a role for a 6 seed Pistons team that you look at now, and that's a legitimate 6 seed. I mean, the Knicks are the Eastern Conference Finals, and you probably feel really good about that. So yeah, I mean, obviously, we like Ron Holland's game here. I thought he did everything he had to do as a rookie, and we'll see where it goes from here. But to me, all rookies, one of the awards that are probably least indicative of where a player is and where their career is going to go.
Yeah, I loved it. Ron Holland, first team ready to rumble. That is true. The confidence, the attitude, the mentality really fit Detroit. I think really endeared him to Pistons fans. And we'll talk Ron again here a little bit later as we get into superlatives and lessons learned from the playoffs. O2, before we get into that, call your shot. I think we're getting MVP tonight. I think SGA is going to win it. I know I've said I would have voted for Jokic if I had a vote. Who do you think wins? I think you've said who you would vote for, who you did vote for. And then also, where do we think Cade Cunningham ends up on All-NBA, which I assume will follow this MVP award release sometime maybe later this week or the beginning of next?
Yeah, you would think that that's around the corner for this is that Shea wins it Like voter fatigue is a real thing. I mean, Shea had an MVP season for the best team. Like it's not like he's clearly a deserving candidate.
Yep.
I think Jokic is going to be a pretty strong number 2. I personally voted for Jokic because to me it was like comparing like an A plus 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 season. It's like an A plus plus season.
Sure.
And like for me, like I think Jokic's role for Denver was more important than Shea's role for OKC, where like OKC still has like a dominant defense even without Shea, although obviously he's part of that too. Like he's a good defender, but for Jokic to average a triple-double, like he essentially had his best season, and he's already a 3-time MVP. So if you had a season that bested your other 3 MVP seasons, you shoot like 46% from 3, and like his season's absurd. It doesn't even look real. And for him to do that for a Denver team that's absolutely nothing without him, like for me, that personally won me over a bit. But my guess is that Shea's going to win it.
Yeah, I am with you. I think that Shea wins it also. Every time we went into voting over on Game Theory, I went in with the idea of trying to push the SGA MVP conversation, and I could never do it in good faith. Like I always came out of my research and my notes and everything. Like I just think Jokic is the best player in the world. I think he's the MVP. And you said it perfectly there where SGA had an MVP caliber season, but that looks differently every year. It's my point about the draft. I don't always like whenever people say, well, that's not a number 5 pick. Well, the number 5 pick looks different in every single draft class based on the talent that's there. If you had 5 Victor Wembanyama's in one draft, the number 5 pick that year looks vastly different than what it looked like last season with Ron Holland. I know that's a very extreme, not plausible scenario, but it is just one of those things. So
yeah, and I also just highlight Jokic averaged career highs in points, 30 points a game, assists 10.2. He was second highest in his career in rebounds, 12.7. Eddie was a career high in steals, 1.8, and he shot 42% from 3, not 46, but still set career highs in percentage and makes from 3. So just absurd season. It's just tough for me to look at that type of season and just not give that like an auto MVP. But it also just speaks to just how good the top of the NBA is now, to where it's still even a debate that you could have a season that good and it's not clear cut at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, let's get into some Pistons conversation here. The first thing I want to start with is, like I said, we're going to do playoff takeaways and kind of what that means for the future. We've talked about this one a little bit, but when you're talking about this team pushing into the future, what does it mean? What does it need? What do you feel great? It's got to start with Cade Cunningham. That's where a lot of conversations start. Oh, you didn't answer that part. Where do you think Cade ends up all NBA teams? I think he gets second. Well, let me I would definitely have him second. I think he actually ends up third. I wonder if he doesn't end up third team. I won't like that. I think he's going to definitely make all NBA. I would have him second. I'm a little nervous he ends up third. Where would you have him? Where do you think he lands?
Yeah, I voted him second.
Okay.
I think that as far as him finishing third, I do think that's a distinct possibility. Just the East as a whole, guard-wise is pretty strong. And, I mean, again, Cade averaged 26, 9, and 6. Like, I think just as far as raw numbers, he was probably top there. But a little bit of that is exposure. Like, you're going against guys who are more established, or in the case of, the Pistons, probably didn't really get that national stage until a little bit later in the year. So I'm curious to see how all of that factors in. I think if you look at it, like he's a top 2 or 3 guard in the East this season pretty easily, but we'll see what that ends up looking like once those votes actually come out.
Okay, so now getting to Cade Cunningham's playoff performance, 25 points on 43, 18% from 3, 83 from the line, 8 rebounds, 8.5 assists. We talked about the stocks and what he did on the defensive end. So, I mean, really, his stocks went up in the playoffs. His rebounding went up in the playoffs. His assists essentially stayed the same. The 2 numbers I want to really look at here, O2, moving forward, is the turnovers and the 3-point percentage. And we've talked about where we think some of this comes from in terms of his conditioning and, just an ability to play those minutes and all of that. What do you think, Omari, in terms of the turnovers versus the 3-point shooting for Cade Cunningham? in the future, especially in the playoffs? Which one helps him take that next step more and helps this team take that next step more?
Yeah, I think the 3-point shooting is what I would go with as far as that. Like, I think that is something that is a little bit conditioning reliant, and I would argue the turnovers are too a little bit, where you just see a shot go flat. And like, to me, if he could still consistently knock those like pull up threes, like it just gives him another dangerous weapon when teams put or try to commit two defenders on him. And that's just the key down the stretch. That's probably one of the one knocks against him in the playoffs, where like otherwise he was extremely productive. But the threes just didn't fall. And I also just think the way he approaches the game, like he's really comfortable in the mid range and posting up, and that's just the way he kind of leans, which is fine. But like you have to see him knock down more threes that he did. And again, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later too, but I think some of that for him is just the load he's carrying. Conditioning wise, when you see how those threes tend to miss.
And so just a few more numbers on the 3-point percentage. I tend to agree with you. So even if you look per 100 possessions for Cade from the 3-point line, he took 8.2 3-point attempts per 100 possessions in the regular season, knocked him down at 36%. In the playoffs, that number actually went down to 5.6 per 100 possession, and then shot it at 18%. So not only did the percentage go down, the volume went down as well. In a series where I thought he could have got his pull-up 3-point jumper anytime he wanted because of how New York was defending him and how they were trying to attack Jalen Brunson, where they would bring Brunson into the action, he would hard hedge, and then there's just a split second there where after he gets around Brunson, before OG gets back, there's a chance to get into that 3-pointer off the bounce. So I find it interesting that his overall volume went down as well. Just to give the turnover numbers as well, per 100 possessions, he averaged 6.5 turnovers in the playoffs. In the regular season, he actually averaged 6.1. So the turnovers numbers look worse per game, but when you turn it to a per 100 possession, it's not as different. Cade was playing 6 more minutes per game in the playoffs. That's partially why the turnovers were up. So there wasn't a vast difference there. I think the 3-point percentage and the 3-point shooting, that would definitely take him to the next level for me. Just like the scoring there, he showed the passing, he's shown the defense, and I'm with you that I think a lot of that has to do with being in elite condition, which we've talked about.
For sure. Yeah, and you brought up just the fact that he had those opportunities to take that three and didn't really go for him, which again, like I think just naturally he is when he attacks the game, he's thinking about getting downhill.
Sure.
And it worked against New York. Like, that was fine. It's not like he necessarily went about the game the wrong way.
Yep.
But if you could just sprinkle in those pull-up threes here and there, like, I think over the course of a game, like, that could make a big difference. Like, not just from a scoring standpoint, but from a momentum standpoint as well. Also just, causes their defense to scramble a little bit more, knowing that, like, they can't just sit in the paint knowing that you're going to come downhill anyway. So I think we both agree on that. The turnovers, too, I have mixed feelings on, because it's like he goes through phases where it's not really an issue and then phases where it is. So I also wonder if that's just more so like what he's being asked to do, just from like a load standpoint, if some of that's just, him wearing down and making mental mistakes.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, we're going to talk about that, like, number 2 option thing in general. It'll be a big conversation all offseason. And again, as part of this episode, a couple more like per 100 possession numbers for Cade. Regular season playoff 2-point attempts and percentage, relatively close. He did take, what is it here? 0.3 attempts per 100 possession. And the percentage is a touch better, like 2%, but not that crazy. And to your point, he actually did get to the free throw line more per 100 possessions in the playoffs than he did in the regular season. So when you look at like the overall percentage, that's really brought down by his lack of 3-point shooting. And I just think that that's the key here. You saw it in regular season games. Whenever the 3-pointer was going, it really unlocked his all-around offense. Okay, let's go completely different side of this, and that is Ron Holland, the rookie that we talked about at the top. Any takeaways from his playoff performance, even his regular season as a whole. We kind of did regular season last episode, but what lesson did we learn about Ron Holland, and what does that mean moving forward with how the Pistons may approach this offseason and this roster in general?
Yeah, I would just say going forward, I don't think it's gonna have any big effect, just because at the end of the day, Ron is a 19-year-old rookie, and like you would expect him to have rookie moments. But playoffs, definitely the pace of the game was a bit different for him to adapt to, and I think especially with him still lacking like a reliable outside jumper and ways to get ahead, like when those transition opportunities really disappeared. It wasn't always as clear like how he could impact the offense, and I think we saw that. So I mean, I just thought he looked like a rookie. It's nothing that really changes, opinions of him going forward. But certainly, like you did see the difference from the regular season there, in that just the intensity and the different pace of the moment was a bit tough for him to adjust to.
Okay, so I just quickly went to NBA.com, sorted by age in the playoffs, 02. Any guesses who the youngest player in the playoffs this year? And our guy Harry says, "What up, though?" in the morning. Yes, I am out of school now, so now we can record in the mornings if we so choose. For some of you, that's good. For some of you, maybe not so good. If you're listening after the fact, obviously we appreciate you. Sean Haddock says, "Hit the like." Haddocks, it is the easiest way to contribute if you're a Pistons fan. Thank you, Sean. We really appreciate that. Okay, so here's my question. Who do you think was the youngest player in the playoffs this year that played at least 5 minutes per game in their team's games played?
I mean, it has to be Ron, right?
Ron, yes.
Yeah,
he is the only player under 21 years old that played. So the 21-year-olds, one of them, he is also a Detroit Piston.
Yeah. Wait. Who's 21 on this team? These guys are so young. Duren. Yeah,
Duren, there you go. Jalen Duren also played. And when you look at minutes played, it's kind of crazy. So, like, you're talking about 21-year-olds, Anthony Black, Cason Wallace, Jarris Walker, Khalil Ware, Jovic, AJ then you get to 22-year-olds. So, like, by far the youngest player. Oh, yeah, Sean, good point. Is Mo Morning or Motown? It may be Motown. My bad. Ben says, watching while eating breakfast in Tucson, Arizona. This is great. Love it, Ben.
7 a.m. Okay. Wait, is this 7 a.m. or 8 a.m.? I think that's Pacific time.
Yeah, I don't.
It's 7 a.m. 7:21.
Yeah, because isn't Arizona the one that doesn't do certain either daylight savings time or whatever? And so sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, Ron Holland. So, young on this team. We saw the minutes get collapsed anyway. We saw that, no daylight savings time in Arizona. Simone Fontecchio was kind of out of the rotation once the playoffs hit. So it wasn't surprising. As Wes mentioned, there were some flashes, and then it just eventually it looked like the series was too much for him and he was forcing it and overthinking. I think he's really interesting moving forward. I think this is my takeaway is he was not ready for the playoffs. I liked what I saw in the regular season. I like a lot of what I saw from Ron Holland, the confidence, the mentality. I think 02, this is a huge offseason for him in particular. I think if he comes back next year and he's essentially the same player or just a small baby step, that probably is going to change where I think his upside could potentially be. That doesn't mean he's not a rotation guy. That doesn't mean he wasn't the right pick at number 5. I just don't know that he ends up being this like two-way big-time starting option that there's potential to be there. I think I want to see that next season in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Ron is that he's still really young. He's still going to be younger than a lot of the rookies coming into this draft class. Like, you have guys coming in, who were freshmen this year, but are already 20 years old, and that's still a few months off for Ron. But like, he's going to attack this offseason hard. Like, I really have no doubts about that, and I am curious to see what version we get next season. Where he did so much stuff like kind of innately this season that gives him a high floor to where it's like baseline. You're getting spirited defense. He's going to push the pace. He's going to be a transition outlet. And if he's really going, then he's going to be able to break down defenses in half court too and get to the rim a little bit. But to me, that's like his main area of growth, right? Like if he could be more effective in those half court scenarios, whether that's the passing reads he's making, or just his handle being a little bit tighter. And I thought his handle was really good it was better than I expected for sure. Can he have a little bit more shake and bake in half courts and be a guy who can consistently generate offense? Defensively, like how much of a leap can he make there? Physically, does he get stronger? I think there's a lot of different ways his development can go. Not even mentioning the outside shot. So I feel like he comes in with a pretty high floor. Like it's his first real off season in an NBA gym from start to finish. He's one of the guys I'm probably most intrigued by going forward, just like what version of him we get after this season.
Yeah, Wes goes, what do we need to see? What does he need to improve this offseason that's reasonable, right? Like we can't say every single player, oh man, they're, shoot 40% from three or something like that. Mm-hmm. So on a per 36 minute basis, he scored 15 points a game on 47, 24, 75. Like I want to see something like that, but in actually playing more minutes, right? Like it's a little bit scary going per 36 minutes because, can they actually do that when they're playing 30 minutes a night? Here's the other thing, O2. Is there room for 30 minutes a game for Ron Holland next year, or 25 minutes a game, or 20 minutes? Like, where do those minutes come for you to truly find this stuff out? For me, it's mostly on the offensive end. I think he's going to play really hard defensively. I think he'll continue to grow. I have some things to nitpick in terms of his off-ball defense and boxing out and some little nuanced things like that. But ultimately, what I would like to see year 1 to year 2 is like a real scoring threat and not just in transition. Like I want to see some of this great stuff we saw in transition and in the half court at times. I want to see him attack closeouts, get to the rim and finish. I want to see him attack closeouts, draw a foul, get to the free throw line. I want to see him attack closeouts, draw 2 defenders, and then find Duran for the lob, or spray it out to Beasley or whoever it is to the perimeter. I want to see a real step, a quality step forward in terms of offensive end production and in real minutes. We're going to talk about defense, Chili. We'll get there. I see you talking about the boxing out. We got it on the outline. I want to see a real growth there, and specifically in the half court also. I know this team can get out and push pace and all of that. So let's go to a short break, O2. When we come back, we're actually going to talk about Tobias Harris and what we saw in the playoffs from him. Is he a core piece or just kind of a nice rotation piece with this team moving forward?
All right, we're back with segment 2. We're going to dive right into Tobias Harris. And I'll just start off by saying, after Cade, he arguably was their second best player.
In the playoffs?
On how it breaks down, I'd be curious to see where you fall on that, because he was good during the regular season, but I thought, he was even better during the playoffs.
Yeah, I think in the playoffs, I think Tobias is the answer for their second best player. Yeah, I think so. I think I agree with that. Regular season is tough. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it later. I think in the playoffs, it was Tobias in terms of the defensive matchup he took. We talk about rebounding. That is an area where Tobias really provides value, especially defensively on the boards. That's him and Cade are 1 and 2 in defensive rebounding because they don't go grab a ton of offensive boards. In the playoffs, on a per game basis, Cade and Tobias were actually 1 and 2 on the defensive boards. Cade Cunningham led this team in defensive rebounding in the playoffs on a per game basis. So, not per 100 possessions or per 36 or anything like that. Again, I realize he played a little bit more minutes. So I think Chuck says it perfectly here. Harris, long-term bridge. How long is the question? I think I agree with that. I suppose there's a scenario, O2, where they get to the deadline and they use that $26 million as part of a pack. That's where the contract is interesting. It could be the money needed to match some sort of a bigger deal if they go to that, especially at the deadline. But I think in general, you would hope he is probably the starter. I know a lot of people won't hope he's the starter this year. He probably starts this year. And then maybe you can transition him into a backup role on a smaller contract? Is that the long-term play, O2? Other than, like, if Bobby Klintman really shows out and turns into a second-round steal, maybe you end up not needing him at all. Bobby's the backup four-man, and you know, whatever ends up happening at the starting spot.
Yeah, I think Tobias is really important for this team. You know, I think just on the floor, like obviously he was one of their more reliable guys. In the playoffs, I mean, all around, like 15.7 points, 7.7 rebounds, 1.2 blocks, and 1 steal. So you're getting like 2.2 stocks. Like the way he stepped up, like it's just various ways he's been able to like show leadership for this team. I think that's just among it. Like of all the adults in the room, he's probably like the most adult in the room as far as kind of like his standing.
we got Unk conversation later in the episode.
Yeah, you know, like he's Unk, but like the guys love him, really respect him, and even like just off the floor stuff, like the way he was able to jive with other people in the org. Like obviously a guy who had played here before and like wanted to be here. Like I think his impact really, like it's a cliche, but I think it really does kind of go beyond just his play on the floor. But his play on the floor was good too. Like it's not like he was just in the locker room leading. Like he was one of their top players this season. So Tobias going forward is interesting because like you do mention the contract situation, and that's a pretty valuable expiring potentially if you want to make a big move at the deadline. And there's some star you're able to go get, kind of like how Indiana went after Pascal Siakam a couple years ago, or that like last year, whatever it was. Pistons could be in that type of boat. So that's interesting because on the other hand, like, Tobias wanted to be here, and I think he really showed that. And, I think there's enough respect both ways, kind of like with Malik Beasley too. Like, the vets are important to this turnaround and, like to leading this group. And like that's something you don't just want to toss away, just like toss it away. Like it would have to really, really make sense for the team going forward. So I do see Tobias as a key piece, but not just like on the floor, but just like franchise wise. I do think this group was more confident and flowed better when he was there, and I think we saw that over the course of the season whenever he missed games.
Yeah, to be clear, I think Tobias staying on this team, it's what Chili says. Harris can be here as long as he wants to be affordable. I agree with that. The only point I will make is if you want a big swing on a big-time player in a trade, Tobias is almost going to have to be included in that trade in terms of the money, unless it's a guy like that's still on his rookie deal. Isaiah's at 15. J.I.'s at 10. Even if there's an extension, that number doesn't kick in until 26, 27. And then everybody else is below 8. I suppose depending on what you give Schroeder or Hardaway or, whoever you sign this offseason, you could put all of these together. I just think Tobias is going to be at that number if you went out and like everybody talks about Devin Booker, right, O2? Tobias kind of has to... I may be speaking out of pocket here. My vibe is he would have to be just to make the money work based on the current contracts the Pistons have. I don't think it has to. I shouldn't say has to. That's the easiest way to get there without compiling like 5 different contracts, because everybody else is in like the 15, 10 maybe. And again, I guess it depends a little bit what some of these guys get in free agency, but I don't expect most of those guys to be that much higher. So like if you're trying to get to 50 million, let's say Beasley was on the non-tax MLE. Well, Stu's at 15, the MLE's 14. You're only at 30. You still got to go get another 20. So now it's like, what, you're going to add Fontecchio? Well, you're still not close. So that was my only point there with that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Like even looking at like if like for people who are like, well, Pistons should like fish around with Boston and look at fake trades and this and that. It's really hard to make any deals work without including Tobias, just because if not Tobias, then you have to include Beef Stew on some of these, and like they just don't have a lot of mid-range salaries. Like is the issue. So that is something that will limit them even this summer as well. If that's a guy that you want to keep going forward.
It's interesting you brought up Boston. I was thinking about us trying to get Keith Smith on, and I would be interested to see what he would think. And because over at Game Theory, we brought up Drew Holiday. We did a Boston offseason preview that will drop here in the next couple of days, and we brought up, like, does Drew Holiday make sense for the Pistons? Harry says they struggled. You brought this up a little bit too, O2. They struggled the most at the end of the season with Tobias out, more so than even when Cade was out. Not saying he's better than Cade, don't trip. So Harry from Order of the Blazing Horse said Tobias Harris is more important to the Detroit Pistons than Cade Cunningham. Everybody aggregate it on. No, Harry did not say that. He was just making a point of how important Tobias was. I wouldn't do that to anybody other than Harry. He's good. He's good people. Chuck says, do we honestly think Bobby can make that jump to be a rotation player this coming season? I seem to be alone on an island, not expecting much out of him. Chuck, I was more so saying not this season, but the next when Tobias's contract is up. And I assume after this year, you would be looking to keep Tobias around in a backup role. You would be looking to upgrade on him. Wes brings up maybe like Ron Holland stepping into the starting lineup, him and Asar being your wing forward combo. And if Bobby was ready to be the backup 4, then you could just let Tobias walk, or maybe that lets you trade him. Yeah, Harry says, take in mind, Order of the Blazing Horse is a comedy podcast. But you guys do talk about the Pistons a little bit. So anyway, next one is rebounding. Do the Pistons have a rebounding problem? They were out-rebounded. Was this just in the playoffs, Wes, or was this the regular season as a whole, being out-rebounded when Duren was out of the game? And so is that an issue? Are they relying on him too much? Wes says that was just in the playoffs. So in the playoffs, 0-2, they were out-rebounded with Jalen Duren on the bench. Should also be pointed out, those then would probably be Paul Reed or no center minutes because Isaiah Stewart was not available.
Yeah, and we did kind of talk about just how important Duren was from a rebounding standpoint. But, like, to reiterate again, like, to go against a team that had Cat and Mitchell Robinson, like, he single-handedly lifted those efforts at times. And, like, he does deserve credit for that, like, to be able to step up in that way and really be the only guy on this team that had any, remote sense of size, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's obviously important with that. We saw how Paul Reed struggled against Mitchell Robinson in those second unit minutes. I will say this is where Tobias is important. I threw out those defensive rebounding numbers for Tobias, for Cade. Like even Asar seems like his impact, like he has the defensive rebounding impact, but a lot of his flash also comes from the offensive rebounding. Duren is similar in that way in terms of the offensive board. So as people bring up, like if you're going to end up with like a Ron Asar wing forward, those guys have to really rebound and really play big. And I think that's where, Tobias goes underappreciated at times on the boards, and even Cade Cunningham. Okay. How would Jaden Ivey have changed this Knicks series? Do you think, how would this have looked differently?
I think the Pistons would not have had the lows that they had at times whenever Cade checked out. I think there were times where, like, especially with the Knicks really having 4 guys that could, like, alternatively, kind of, like, take over, hit big shots, like, generate their own offense. And the Pistons obviously were more limited in that sense, where outside of Cade, like, you have more so, like, catch and shoot guys outside of Tobias. Like, I just thought J.I. would have solved some of that down the stretch, especially with how close those games were. I mean, just having one other guard who can break down the defense and get a bucket is huge. Like late in games, we could see things stagnate a little bit. I thought Schroeder did a good job of stepping up and kind of filling that gap too. But yeah, J.I. comes in. Like, I think a couple of those games go differently, like just because of how much pressure he puts on defenses.
I have an interesting question. Who doesn't play if J.I. is healthy? Do they not? Here's the. Do you think they trade for Dennis Schroeder if J.I. doesn't break his leg?
So that's tough, right? I think that's tough because they still did have a need for like some veteran point guard play before he got hurt. And I think if you evaluate the market and you're still trying to upgrade the roster, if you're not looking at Schroeder, like, I guess who else would that acquisition have been? So I think it became more of a priority, obviously, after J.I. went down. But I still think if there's one area you were going to address going into the deadline, it still would have been adding a veteran presence in the backcourt. So that's an interesting what if, but I still think there's a chance it would have been Schroeder.
So this was an argument I always push back on. Chuck says they needed another guard before Ivy got hurt. And I know that everybody says that. My pushback was always like, okay, well, we want J.I. to play with the ball in his hands, but we want a veteran point guard. Like, where were those minutes going to come from? And then J.I. never gets to play on the ball because he doesn't play on the ball with Cade. And then if Schroeder's there, like, so that's always was my kind of, it was an interesting conversation. I don't agree that the team could use a stabilizer like Dennis Schroeder. It just made me like, okay, well, now are we taking growth out of J.I.'s hands because we're not ever letting him play the ball in all of his minutes? Cade's playing on the ball or Schroeder's playing on the ball. J.I.'s always playing off the ball. And I know Schroeder can play off the ball a little bit, but that's just not what he does best. I know he played off of Cade at times. So I think it's interesting. I still wonder if they would have made Dennis can play on and off. I understand that the three-point shooting is touch and go. I know he shot it really well in the playoffs. It just, maybe that is a really good backcourt. Maybe those two guys together do work well together, like in a second U. Maybe J.I. and Schroeder would thrive. So, like, when I look at minutes, the way it played out, Hardaway Jr. played 31, Schroeder played 27, Beasley played 27. Do we think each of those guys just like take a 10-minute per game hit and that gets J.I. to 30? Is that where the minutes come from?
Yeah, that's interesting too, because that is a little bit more of a crowded backcourt. Like my question more so is like I wonder how it impacts THJ like going forward in the and then of course he's in free agency as well. But like if J.I. is going to come back and he starts, then like can you start him, THJ, and Cade? Right? Probably not. So to me that's probably where more of the minutes come from, and I'm curious kind of how that works out in real time as THJ and his team, like everybody figures out the best path, but something has to give, right? And I'm not sure how else those minutes break out when all these guys are obviously pretty deserving. THJ would still have a role, obviously. I just don't know if he's playing around 28, 29 minutes and starting like he did last season.
Sean, I agree with here's what I say about all of this on-off ball stuff. So Sean says Cade can play off ball too. Let's not dismiss that. I agree that Cade can play off ball. My question would be, how much have we seen it? So that's my thing. I agree with all of this. I agree that you need multiple initiators in the playoffs, like Chili says. I believe that J.I. can play on and off. I believe that Cade, Schroeder. But my thing is, these guys have to work well off ball together. They have to be willing to do it. How much did we see Cade actually do that? That's all I'm saying. And then the other thing is, then people want Asar to play on the ball as well at times and initiate offense. It just seems like there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen, I guess, is what I would say. So I agree with you. I'm playing devil's advocate with some of this conversation of how do all of these on-ball guys work together? Do they mesh together the right way? That's all I'm saying. I would love Cade to play more off the ball. I would love getting him off the ball actions, cutting back doors, zoom actions. I've said from day one when people used to yell at me that Cade and J.I. would not work together, and I said go back to the very first play of Summer League where they ran him off an off-ball action and he hit Duren for a lob. I think that is actually how J.I. is best used. I'm just throwing it out there for people who are like, no, Cade's on ball, Schroeder's on ball, J.I.'s, he's an on-the-ball player. I think they all have to learn to work together, and I think all of them, especially Cade, I got you. Interesting. Cade not bringing up the ball up the court. That's interesting. I think Cade could grow with that, but I would love to see it more in regards to that, because I did this with Brunson, like watching Brunson move off the ball. They create some really easy things for him. So Chuck says Cade was best shooting the three when Ivy was setting him up. But, I love all of it. So Wes says, Jay on ball is like Donovan Mitchell on ball. Yes, he's great with the ball in his hands, but he's great at creating for himself first, not running the show. That's a good point, right? Like he's not necessarily the creator. Maybe him and Schroeder would have worked well together. My thing is like, would Schroeder have wanted to, like, would he have been happy in playing like just sparingly minutes? And then somebody else brought up like, then where does Marcus Sasser minutes come at all? So this is really fun in terms of the roster, right? Here's what's nice, too. We're not trying to find guys to play minutes that we think would be good at it. Feel like that was a problem a few years ago. I was like, man, we have this guy starting in the backcourt. That's not exactly great.
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely think Ji can like thrive on and off the ball, especially with the improvement of his 3-point shooting. Like he shot almost
Yes.
41% last season, and uh like and that's good. Like you have different guys bringing the ball up. Like to me, that's good. Like I think Ji is probably not purely just an on-ball guard. I think you want him cutting a little bit. You want him spotting up. Like you don't want to burden him too much with having the ball like he did, like his rookie season when Cade went out. So the toughest aspect of that is that we're still like trying to solve some of this stuff. As Cade goes into year 5 and Ji goes into year 4, just because they've kind of alternated
Being
getting
injured.
hurt.
Yeah.
But like ultimately though, I think Ji can probably play next to Cade and next to Schroeder, and like the main question is just can you play all 3 of those guys in the 4 for if you have to go another way and get some more size on there? But I think he can work.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm with you. I like the idea of having multiple ball handlers, multiple initiators. Me and Wes have had this conversation a lot. The one thing caveat I always like to throw out, they have to be able to do off the ball stuff. They have to be willing to do it, the relocation, and it's not always an easy mindset shift to do that. That's all I'm going to say. I like it, but I still do think, as we've talked about, who ends up not getting the minutes, because if Ji is going to go play 30, then, somebody's not playing that was in the playoff rotation. Before we go to break, I want to throw this to everybody watching live. First, thank you being with us in the middle of the morning on a Wednesday. We are going to do some superlatives coming up, and we're asking for the game of the year. So actually, let's just do this. What was your favorite memory from a game this season? And drop that in the comments. We will star them, and then we'll put them all out there. So if you're watching live, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, thank you. If you're watching after the fact, you can DM us or comment or whatever. But if you're watching live with us right now, what was your favorite game this season for the Pistons? We'll get into that and some other superlatives right after this short break.
All right, we're back with segment 3. And as Bryce said, we are going to close this episode off just with some superlatives. So once again, if whatever you think the game of the season was, please drop that in the comments, because there's 82 of these things. Exclude the 2 playoff wins; those don't count. I think we all agree that those were historic. So, whatever
you
your
guys got to
was,
give as much detail as you can too, because listen, it was a lot of games this year, and a lot of it runs together. So Cloudy says watching Cade smoke the Knicks at Madison Square Garden live. Chuck says the Ivy 4-point play winner. The other Sean, best memory was J.I.'s buzzer beater versus the Raptors. Chili says smoking Indy was up there for me. In-game tourney, favorite moment, Ivy 4-point play against Sacramento. And Harry says Cade bucket, Cade block versus, I do remember that one, the Cade bucket, Cade block versus Atlanta. So, okay, our first one here. Keep them coming, guys. We'll star them. We'll come back to them. Who was the forgotten hero of this season for the Pistons? I feel like this is hard for us because we kind of talk about everybody. If you went to a national perspective, maybe when you talk to national people or whatever, who do you think is the player that doesn't get talked enough about for the Pistons?
That's a tough one, because
I'm struggling here.
Yeah, it still might be I would say Isaiah Stewart. Like I think he got a lot more credit this season for being a really good defensive player, but I think whenever you saw the flare ups, like when he was in Minneapolis and at those moments, and you see some of the memes online, like, oh, he's always fighting, but like, what is he doing on the court and this and that? And it's like, no, he's like one of their best players. Like he's their best all around defender. I think you could make an argument for a star as well, but like for me, it's beef stew. Like I don't think his impact necessarily is as well understood as it should be if you're just talking from like a general national audience.
Okay, so I think these 2 comments are really good. I don't Stu would probably be my answer as well for a national audience. Cloudy says Ron for the energy. I actually think Ron is probably the right answer for me for this specific question, in terms of when you just look at his numbers. Ron Holland in his rookie season averaged 6 points on 47, 24, 75, 2.7 rebounds, an assist, half a steal, a turnover, 15 minutes a game. I don't know that people realize just like how his energy, his attitude really fit in well with this team, and kind of the impact he made in those 15 games over 81 games played. I don't know that people understand how consistently Ron Holland was in the Pistons rotation. And again, for a team that won 40 plus games, finished 6th in the East, he was a real rotation piece night in and night out. And I don't know that national media, national fans would probably realize that. They would probably think like, oh, he played 20 minutes here, then played, 2 guys were hurt, so played 25 minutes and then missed 2 games. No, it was night in and night out, O2.
Yeah, no. Like, it was extremely consistent. That's one thing this team had in general, too, was just overall consistency. But yeah, like, I'm going with Stu. We have some people here for Ron. Like, Ron, of course, 81 games. Should have played 82. I think we both probably had some question marks with the decision to suspend him for a game. Davon Ambitious says J.I. is the guy that doesn't get talked about enough. A few good options here. Like, I think even toward the end of the season, like, you could even put Duren in there a bit if you look at, just what he was doing offensively, I think he averaged like 3.5 assists down the stretch. Lots of good contenders for this one. Outside of Cade, I mean, like, Tobias may have an argument, obviously. I think people understood that he had a improved season from Philly, but still, like, his consistency for this team was big.
Yeah, so Devon says J.I. is the guy doesn't get talked about enough. I think that's probably fair. Like, I feel like even for me, who I feel like I've been a huge J.I. fan and supporter and defender at times, have forgot, after, out of sight, out of mind, right? We didn't see him play the last 50 games of the season. Right. We didn't see him in the playoffs. I've brought up multiple times. It was my biggest disappointment of the season was not getting to see more of his minutes and see him in the playoffs. But it is important to remember and note he was averaging almost 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists on 46, 41, 73. So that is a really cool call. The other Sean says, not as big a fan as Ron. Interesting. But B-Ball Paul sparked it up every time he hit the court. Good shout out there for B-Ball Paul. Let's get to some other of the favorite moments. So Sports Time says Miami ESPN game winner, beating the Celtics, beating the Cavs without Cade and Tobias. The first ESPN game where Asar ran the point. Ethan says, early in the year, November 4th against the Lakers, because it's when I realized they were a playoff team. Both Cade and Ivy were crucial for closing the game. Harry says, shout out Tim Hardaway Sr. for being there for his kid every game. That was kind of cool seeing all the different, older time players being there. Jared, Asar crossing Tatum in a big win over Boston. Cloudy, the Atlanta bucket block was my turning point of the year. And Sean, this probably won't be a popular one, but my favorite moment of the entire season was Stewie holding out the Detroit on his chest while being ejected in Minnesota. I seriously got a tear in my eye. All right, next one. Who was the second most important player on the team? Who was the Robin of the year, Omari?
Robin of the year. It's tough because I feel like there's so many different guys that played big roles. This team didn't really have a true Robin, but I'm probably going, if you're just looking at most versatile, both holes plugged, I would probably go Tobias. Okay. I think he, outside of Cade, you look at the variety of ways he impacted the game, and obviously, the substantial role he played too as a starter. He would get my Robin of the Year award, and I'm just going to go over his stats real quick. As a reminder, 13.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 48% overall, 35% from 3. And he also had almost 2 combined blocks and steals per game. So, like I said, just all-around impact.
So, M. Weasley 13 says, I vote Beasley for Robin because his shooting opened up so much for the rest of the team. I think I probably would go Beasley as well. I kind of lean more offense whenever I'm thinking this. I understand. Yeah. I understand a lot of different answers. I don't mind your Tobias answer in terms of what he did and the matchups he took defensively, his rebounding. We've talked about that. I think the ultimate answer is what Chuck says. It changed game to game. This was always my argument for Cade Cunningham being second team All-NBA was name me the Pistons' second best player. And when you ask people to do that, you get silence because they have to think about it so hard because they're just like, well, was it this guy? Was it that guy? The other Sean brings up an interesting, I'd say Duren, if he didn't improve the way he did, we wouldn't have made it to the playoffs. So that's interesting as well. I kind of go, I'm cool with kind of any answer here, which is why, as Wes points out, we will have the, conversation all offseason about the second option, which is also why it's important for Devon to bring up Jaden Ivey, because maybe Jaden Ivey is just the answer and we didn't get to see it. So Bayan says, good evening. So where are you at that you're saying good evening? Because it is morning where we are at. Favorite moment, swept the Lakers and the Robin of the year. Maybe Tobias. So a lot of Tobias, it seems like, but I think we know there's a few different things there. Wes asked the new pillar, or the next topic, did any of Ivy, Asar, Duren, Sasser establish themselves as 100% a core building block next to Cade? This is a fun one. So we know Cade is the building block. Who else is 100%? Omari. I mean, you could even throw in veterans. Like if anybody thinks that Beasley needs to be a building block because of his floor spacing, which one of those guys, if any, do you feel like is a building block O2?
Yeah, 100% is a strong word. Like, especially in the league where Luka can get traded. I'm not going to.
Okay, that's fair. Let's go 80%. Yeah. Let's go 80% because, like you said, nobody on this team is untouchable, untradeable, other than Cade Cunningham if Luka Doncic becomes available for trade.
Yeah. So I would say if you're just looking generally at the guys that I think are like these guys strive alongside Cade and we are invested in them. And some of this is going to be disrupted by the fact that they have to pay guys. So, we'll kind of see how those timelines work out. But generally, I would say like Isaiah Stewart, just heart and soul of the team, emotional leader. Defense, obviously, for all those reasons, like he offers a lot to this team. I think J.I., for what he did before he got hurt, like that's valuable to have, for very obvious reasons. So I'll put him in that category. I think Duren, especially the way he stepped up as the year went on, and he gets some grace just because he was like 20 years old at the start of the season. Like he's still so young, but he did improve as the year went on, and then for him to hit an even higher tier in the playoffs, where like he was already one of their best offensive players, but like especially as the series went on, they leaned on his playmaking more and more. Like offensively and defensively, like he feels I think some pretty important needs for this team. So I would put Duren in there. Then it goes without saying Asar Thompson, and I would put Ron in there as well. Like I think he really like even just beyond the court, like the way he just became kind of like the kid brother of the team and fit in, I think was really nice. Beasley, like again, it's really tough to get guys who could shoot as well as he can. And the way that this team has had spacing issues over the years, and Bees wants to be here, I don't think you could just let a guy like that leave. So that's probably 6 or 7 guys, but I would say to varying extents, I think those all fit in.
If I had to rank where I feel like the organization is right now, and Wes says Asar 90% confident, I think Asar is going to be I think Asar is the guy that's most likely to stay around with the roster as a pillar. I think I would go Ivy, then Duren, then Ron. I'm not sure. I would probably take Sasser out of that based off what we saw this year and how they did it. Maybe they let him grow, but I kind of wonder if we're not getting closer to letting Sasser get to a new place where maybe he gets a bigger opportunity. I think that's how I would rank where my confidence in my belief in what the organization would do and how they would prioritize these guys. Again, if someone wants to offer Devin Booker and they say it starts with Asar Thompson, I'm not saying that they wouldn't consider that. I just think to me, that's where it would go. I think the ranking would be Asar, Ivy, Duren, then Ron, and then I would have tier break after that in terms of the young guys. All right, next, Unk of the Year. Who was the most valuable vet and why? I think we should probably take Tobias out of this. Well, that's not fair because I brought up Malik as well. Who was best for the vibes of the veteran guys, Omari?
It's tough. I actually asked Ron about this at the end of the year. Like, what do all 3 vets, what have they kind of brought, like, for you and Ron essentially said like Tobias is like he's like Unc, like he's the one you could go to for like pretty much anything, like super supportive. He said he talks to Tobias about like finance stuff, even like just like life stuff. Like he said, Tim Hardaway Jr. was like fashion, cars, like kind of like lifestyle stuff, and then Bees was just kind of more like big brother. Like he said, he could just call Bees for like even just something like food related, like kind of random. So it's tough to say. Like I feel like all these like being inside the locker room is tough for me to kind of put one Unc as being above the other Uncs. I would just say that Tobias is probably lead Unc. Uh, like I think he's the one that like embodied Unc the most. I give
Yeah,
it
so
to. It's tough for me to point out one vet. Like I think they all were pretty big for this group.
from an outsider's perspective, I only made the one game this year in Denver, so I wasn't around the team, nearly as much as you. I would have said Beasley just from the vibes. Like, the thing that stood out to me, the one media I got to do was whenever JB was asked about Malik Beasley before that Nuggets game. And the first thing JB went to was Beasley's vibes and the positivity and stuff like that, as opposed to immediately going to his shooting. And then, just the celebrations and the way the rest of the team kind of leaned into that. And then, then they would do everybody else's celebrations and all of that. So I would lean Beasley, but that's just like from the single perspective I get as an outsider watching games on TV. I don't have near as much in terms of the ins and outs of a locker room and who the young guys are leaning on for advice and who's being vocal in a timeout and, on travel and stuff like that. So, yeah. Statement game of the year. Which game this past year was the game that proved, yes, this team is for real?
It's tough. I feel like there were like 20 games that were like, okay, like yeah, this team can actually do some things. I think a statement game for me late was like that game winner for Cade on like against Miami in Miami, because not only was that like probably one of the biggest stages the team had up to that point. Like it was an affirmation game for Cade and also an affirmation for the way that this team has been resilient and has been able to figure out games. That's the one that comes off the top of my head, like as like a late season game that embodied that. But I mean, there's probably like 12 or 13 games really you could point to. Like I know early on that win over the Lakers was big, and then Phoenix sort of in that same stretch. Those were big wins. You got the ones over the Knicks at MSG. Those were big. There's a lot of answers you could go with this one.
Yeah, so I'm looking through like the schedule, and that December win at the Garden kind of stands out because you had a 3-game losing streak against the Bulls, Hornets in overtime, Magic, pull off a win against the Raptors, lose to the Grizzlies by 20. They did then in-season tournament game win over the Pacers, but then they lose to the Sixers, lose to the Bucks, lose to the Celtics, and you're going to New York, and they get that win there. I also feel like there was a Lakers game somewhere else that I felt like they really, really like the response. I will tell you one. Yeah, Detroit dominates Boston to end their win streak. I think that's another one as well. I will also say the game that will stand out to me most, that I will always reference about this season, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, will be Game 5, Omari.
Yeah.
Like that one, and I know that's like it's very new, and that's not. I don't know that that's exactly what the question is asking here, but they got screwed in Game 4, and they went back to Madison Square Garden and an elimination game, and instead of laying down and just poor us or whatever, they did like that. That response exemplified what I had been saying all year about this team responding in so many situations, whether within a game, within a road trip, within whatever. And so that was the game that will always stand out to me. I'll always remember that they went back to Madison Square Garden, Game 5, after the no call in Game 4, and they won and got it back to LCA for a Game 6. So that is the one that will always stand out to me about this season.
Yeah, and I think that's like the absolute most defining one. If you're just looking at examples of this team never like shedding their past habit of like not rising to moments and like repeatedly doing so, like in this playoffs. And it almost had like Lions vibes. So like a few years ago, before the Lions became like a real contender, they had a few wins toward the end of the year that were like, okay, like the old version of this team wouldn't have done that. To me, that was like the win for the Pistons for sure. That was like, okay, like this team has turned the page and they're here to stay.
All right, to finish us up here, John Everhart says favorite moment of the year was Cade's dunk in Houston, the one on all y'all, one incredible. And then, all right, Big Dog Pistons from Twitter. What are your expectations for next season? Make second round of playoffs, top 4 regular season record, win the title. Where are you at with expectations for next season before we get to see what the roster construction looks like?
Yeah, it's tough to say. Like I say we could go ahead and revisit this one like toward the end of the summer. But I think at the very least you expect another postseason appearance. Like the league is so competitive now. I mean, you could be a 7th seed and still have a shot at like making it to the conference finals. So I don't put too much stock into that. I just say build on this season. Obviously, 44 is probably the floor, assuming you have good health and everything lined up properly. And we'll see what they do this summer. But like baseline, that's just kind of where I'm at. It's just there's just too much variance and randomness in the NBA to set firm expectations at this point. So we'll see what happens once they get everything wrapped up this summer.
Wes took the words out of my mouth. Don't take a step back. Not moving forward is okay. Not ideal, but it's okay. But don't slip back. And this is under the idea for me, Omari, that they essentially go the run it back path, right? They lean into the young guys. They just have the whatever vets, whether it's the same vets or they replace them with different vets. You cannot take a step back. You can't win 35 games next year and be the 10 seed and, then not even make the playoffs. That would be a disappointment for me. And to Ethan's point, growth isn't always linear. I agree with that. I think plateauing for a season would be okay with me. If they win mid 40s again and they have another great first round and maybe they lose again, I'm not going to think that that's a disappointment. Again, if they play run it back, if they go with an all-in move, this completely changes my answer, right? Like now all of a sudden expectations have changed because you pushed your cards in. But I think I'm with that. You can't take a step back. It's okay if you plateau a little bit, reevaluate, figure it out, and then move forward after that. This was kind of our last chance to look backwards, guys. Moving forwards with episodes, I think we had like 5 or 6 up until the draft and then free agency and summer league, where obviously content kind of writes itself pretty easy during those times of the year. Over the next handful, we'll try to bring some guests on. We'll talk offseason. We'll try to get Keith Smith on to talk salary cap. And we'll look at this offseason. What are the options? Where do people think they should go? Where can this team be 6 weeks from now or whatever it is? But for today, thank you for everybody joining us here live. A little bit of a different time. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, review, rate, all of those things. If you're listening after the fact, thank you so much. We appreciate you. O2, take it away, my guy.
As always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.